Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My early shift at a distribution center means I'm up at 3 a.m. every weekday. The job is physically demanding, loading trucks, managing inventory, dealing with angry drivers who are behind schedule. When I get home around 2 p.m., I'm exhausted and just want some peace and quiet to decompress before getting to bed early. When I moved into my ground floor apartment 5 years ago, I chose the unit furthest from the main road. The building was older but well maintained, and the landlord assured me it was a quiet complex with respectful tenants. For the first few months, everything was perfect. I could get my 8 hours of sleep, wake up refreshed, and handle my demanding job without issues. Then he moved in next door. From day one, this guy was a nightmare. Our apartments shared a wall, and apparently, his idea of reasonable behavior was completely different from mine. Every single night without fail, he'd crank his music up after 11 p.m. Not just regular music either, bass-heavy stuff that made my walls vibrate. I'd lie in bed trying to sleep, feeling the thump 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 through the wall like a heartbeat from hell. The music wasn't even the worst part. He'd have these screaming matches with his friends that would go on for hours. They'd be out on his patio, voices carrying through the thin walls, arguing about the most ridiculous things. Money, relationships, who said what to who. It was like living next to a reality TV show. His dog was another story entirely. A big German shepherd that he'd let out to do its business right on the small patch of grass outside my front door. Every morning I'd step outside to find fresh piles of dog waste right where I had to walk to get to my car. The smell was awful, especially in the summer heat. I started having to walk around the long way just to avoid stepping in it. But the parking situation really pushed me over the edge. Our building had designated spots for residents and a few visitor spaces near the entrance. This guy would park his beat-up sedan right in the visitor bay, taking up space that was meant for guests. It meant anyone coming to see me had to park 3 blocks away and walk. When I had my elderly mother visit, she had to hobble that entire distance because of his selfishness. I tried talking to him reasonably at first. I knocked on his door one evening around 8 p.m., introduced myself politely, and explained that I worked early shifts and needed to sleep. I asked if he could keep the music down after 11 p.m. He brushed me off completely, telling me that everyone in the building was noisy and that I needed to chill out. He said this was just how apartment living worked. I tried explaining that the music was really loud and making it hard for me to get the sleep I needed for work. He shrugged and said it wasn't his problem, that he paid rent just like I did. I tried a few more times over the following weeks, even bringing up the dog waste and parking issues. Each time he'd give me the same dismissive attitude. He kept telling me to chill out, that it wasn't his problem, that everyone was noisy. It was like talking to a brick wall. The lack of sleep was starting to affect my work performance. I'd show up groggy, make mistakes with inventory counts, and struggled to keep up with the physical demands of the job. My supervisor pulled me aside twice to ask if everything was okay at home. I was reaching my breaking point. Then fate intervened with a little help from technology. I'd recently upgraded to smart lighting throughout my apartment. The system was supposed to make life easier, dimming lights automatically, setting schedules, controlling everything from my phone. One evening, I was using the app to adjust the brightness in my living room when a notification popped up that changed everything. The app told me it had detected a new device, a portable air conditioning unit from some fancy brand. It asked if I wanted to add this device to my home network. I stared at the screen for a moment, confused. I didn't own a portable air conditioning unit. But then it hit me. My living room shared a wall with his apartment. This had to be his air conditioner, and somehow it was connecting to my smart home network. Without hesitation, I clicked yes. The app immediately gave me full access to the unit. I could see the temperature settings, fan speed, timer functions, everything. I sat there for a moment, hardly believing my luck. After months of dealing with his inconsiderate behavior, the universe had just handed me the perfect tool for revenge. I started planning immediately. He typically went to sleep around 1 a.m. after his nightly music sessions. I had to be up at 3 a.m. for work anyway, so the timing was perfect. I would wait until he'd been asleep for about 2 hours, then strike. The first night, I set my phone alarm for 3 a.m. When it went off, I opened the app and cranked his air conditioner to full blast. Maximum fan speed, temperature set to 61 degrees Fahrenheit. The thing was loud, really loud. I could hear it roaring through the wall, and I imagined him jolting awake to the sudden Arctic blast and mechanical grinding. When I got to work at 6 a.m., I checked the app again. Sure enough, someone had turned it back to quiet mode, but not for long. I immediately set it back to full blast, as noisy and cold as possible. I kept this routine up for 2 solid weeks. Every morning at 3 a.m., I'd wake up his air conditioner like an angry mechanical rooster. Every time I got to work, I'd check and find it had been turned down, so I'd crank it right back up. He had no idea it was me. For all he knew, his air conditioner was just malfunctioning. The effects were immediate and satisfying. The loud music stopped. The screaming arguments with friends became rare. I'd see him during the day looking exhausted, bags under his eyes, clearly not getting the sleep he needed. The irony was delicious. After about 2 weeks of this routine, I noticed something interesting on our neighborhood Facebook group. Someone had posted in the free section about a portable air conditioning unit that needed repair. The post said the unit would turn on and off randomly and run at full blast, making it too expensive to fix. They were giving it away for free and would leave it outside apartment 2B after 5 p.m. Apartment 2B was his unit. I couldn't resist. That evening, I casually walked over and picked up the air conditioner. It was heavier than I expected, but I managed to get it into my apartment. I plugged it in and checked. It worked perfectly fine. No random turning on and off, no issues with the controls. The poor guy had thrown away a perfectly good air conditioner because he couldn't figure out that someone else was controlling it. Now I had a backup air conditioning unit for free, and my nights were finally quiet again. The music stopped completely, the arguments were rare, and he even started picking up after his dog more regularly. I guess the sleep deprivation had taught him some manners. I still work those early morning shifts, but now I actually get the sleep I need. The air conditioner sits in my bedroom, working perfectly whenever I need it. My husband and I moved into our current house about 2 years ago. It's a decent neighborhood, mostly quiet families and retirees. The house next door has this woman in her early 30s who moved in with her boyfriend about 6 months after we did. They seemed normal enough at first. We'd wave when we saw each other, typical neighbor stuff. Then she got pregnant. That's when things started getting weird. It started small. She'd come over asking to borrow things constantly. Sugar, eggs, tools, you name it. My husband thought I was being too harsh when I started getting annoyed about it, but it was literally every other day. And she never returned anything or offered to replace what she used. The real problem started when she had the baby 3 months ago. Suddenly, everything became about how hard her life was as a new mom. She'd complain loudly in her backyard about how tired she was, how difficult everything was, like she was the first person to ever have a baby. But the worst part was how she started acting like the whole neighborhood should revolve around her needs. She complained to the homeowners association when our other neighbor mowed his lawn on Saturday mornings because it woke up her baby. She left passive-aggressive notes on people's cars if they parked too close to her driveway. She even had the nerve to ask me to move my car from in front of my own house because she needed the space for visitors coming to see the baby. So when the storm hit last week, I should have seen this coming. The power went out Tuesday evening, and the utility company said it could be days before it was restored. My husband and I had just done our weekly grocery shopping, and our fridge was packed with food. We both work from home, so we had some savings set aside for emergencies. Wednesday morning, we drove to the hardware store and bought a small generator. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep our fridge and a few lights running. The generator wasn't cheap, but it was worth it to save our groceries and have some basic power. We set it up in our backyard, ran the extension cord through the window, and it worked perfectly. Our fridge was humming along, and we felt pretty good about our quick thinking. Thursday afternoon, we needed to go out for some additional supplies, batteries, bottled water, that sort of thing. The power was still out across the whole area, so we figured we'd be quick. We were gone maybe 2 hours max. When we got back, I immediately noticed something was wrong. I couldn't hear the generator running. I walked around to the backyard and stared at the empty space where our generator had been sitting. The extension cord was still there, just unplugged and coiled up. For a moment, I thought maybe someone had stolen it, but then I heard it, the familiar sound of our generator running, but coming from next door. I walked over to the fence and looked into my neighbor's backyard. There it was, our generator, running her fridge and what looked like a baby monitor setup. I was furious. I walked right over to her front door and knocked. She answered with the baby on her hip, looking annoyed that I disturbed her. I told her that the generator in her backyard was mine. She casually admitted that she had borrowed it, like it was no big deal. When I pointed out that she had taken it from my yard without asking, she got defensive. She explained that she had a baby and I didn't understand how important it was to keep his formula and baby food cold. She said I didn't have kids, so I would be fine for a few hours. I asked her if she was serious and reminded her that it was my property. I had bought that generator for my own use. She said this was about a baby's health and safety, and I was just worried about some groceries. I told her those groceries cost me over $200, and yes, I wanted to keep them from rotting. More importantly, she had stolen my generator. She got angry and said she didn't steal anything. She borrowed it because she needed it more than I did. She had a baby to think about. She told me I clearly lacked compassion. She called me uncompassionate for wanting my own property back. I demanded my generator back right away. She agreed but said I was being completely unreasonable. She hoped I could live with myself knowing I prioritized my convenience over a baby's needs. She made this big dramatic show of getting the generator, huffing and sighing like I was asking her to move mountains. She wheeled it back over to my yard, all the while muttering about how selfish people are these days. But I wasn't done. I was so angry about her attitude that I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I called the police. The officer who came out was professional, but clearly thought this was a waste of his time until I explained that she'd taken it without permission and refused to see anything wrong with it. He went over to talk to her. I could hear her from my house, going on about how she was just trying to take care of her baby and how I was being vindictive. The officer came back about 10 minutes later. He told me he had explained to my neighbor that taking someone's property without permission is theft, regardless of her reasons. She had agreed not to bother me again, and he had made a note of the incident. I thanked him and said I just wanted it documented in case this happened again. He said that was smart thinking and advised me to keep the generator locked up if I could. The next day, the power came back on. That weekend, I was checking my mail when I noticed something interesting. There was a notice from the utility company about unpaid bills. It was addressed to my neighbor, but it had been put in my mailbox by mistake. I was going to just put it in her mailbox, but I noticed the amount. She owed over $800 in back electric bills. Suddenly, her desperation for the generator made more sense. She wasn't just worried about the baby's formula during the outage, she'd been having her power shut off regularly for not paying her bills. I kept the notice, not to be petty, but because I realized she'd probably try this again. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, there was another storm. Not as bad as the first one, but enough to knock out power for a few hours. I had locked the generator in our garage this time, but I watched from my window as she came into our backyard looking for it. When she couldn't find it, she actually had the nerve to knock on my door and ask where it was. She asked about the power being out again and wanted to know where my generator was. I told her it was locked up safe. She asked if she could borrow it because the baby needed it. I said no, and before she started with the baby excuse again, maybe she should focus on paying her electric bill instead of stealing from her neighbors. She knew I'd seen the notice. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. I told her about the $800 she owed the electric company. Maybe if she paid her bills instead of buying whatever else she spent her money on, she wouldn't need to steal from people during power outages. She turned bright red and started to say something, but I closed the door. I haven't heard from her since. She avoids eye contact when we're both outside, and I've noticed she's been keeping her distance. The baby excuse doesn't work as well when people know you're just irresponsible with money. My husband thinks I was too harsh, but I don't care. Some people need to learn that having a baby doesn't give you the right to take whatever you want from other people. And if she tries it again, I've got that utility notice saved as proof of what her real problem is. I drive for a local pizza place, and the pay isn't great, but it keeps me going while I'm saving up for college. My car isn't anything fancy, just a beat-up Honda that's been with me since high school, but it gets me from point A to point B, and that's all I need. That Tuesday started like any other day. I just finished my shift and was heading home around 9 p.m. when everything went sideways. I was sitting at a red light at the intersection of Main and Oak, listening to some music, when out of nowhere this silver car comes barreling through the intersection and slams right into my passenger side. The impact was incredible. My car spun around and ended up facing the wrong direction. My head was spinning and my ears were ringing, but I managed to unbuckle my seatbelt and get out to check the damage. The entire passenger side of my car was crumpled in, and I could see coolant leaking onto the asphalt. I looked over at the car and saw this middle-aged woman getting out. She had perfectly styled blonde hair and was wearing what looked like expensive workout clothes. She walked over to inspect her vehicle, which had some front-end damage but was clearly still drivable. I asked her if she was okay and told her we needed to call the police and exchange insurance information. She waved me off and said it was just a little fender bender and that there was no need to get the cops involved. I pointed at my completely smashed car and told her this was way more than a little fender bender. She just shrugged and said maybe I shouldn't have been in her way. I was stunned. I told her she was the one who ran the red light and that I was completely stopped at the intersection. She denied it completely and claimed I had pulled out in front of her. By this time, a few other people had stopped to see what was going on. One guy, probably in his 60s, got out of his truck and walked over to us. He told Karen that he saw the whole thing and that she had blown right through that red light. He said I was completely stopped and that this was clearly her fault. Karen told him to mind his own business and called him an old man. The witness said he was calling the police because this was a clear case of reckless driving. Karen's whole demeanor changed when she heard the word police. She started getting agitated and kept looking around nervously. She tried to convince us that we didn't need the police and offered to pay for my damages out of pocket. I told her I was sorry, but I needed to file a police report because this is exactly why we have insurance. The older man had already pulled out his phone and was dialing. Karen started panicking and said she really needed to get going because her kids were expecting her home. I told her we weren't going anywhere until the police got here and we sorted this out properly. That's when Karen completely lost it. She started yelling about how she didn't have time for this and how we were all just trying to scam her. She stomped back to her car and got in. I asked her where she was going and told her she couldn't just leave. She said to watch her and started backing up. I could see she was planning to drive away. The older man, who had witnessed everything, must have realized what was happening because he quickly positioned himself behind her car. The witness told her she wasn't leaving the scene of an accident and that it was a felony. Karen screamed at him to get out of her way or she would run him over. The man said he wasn't moving until the police got here. What happened next still gives me chills. Karen actually put her car in reverse and backed into the man. He wasn't seriously hurt, but he got knocked down and scraped up his hands and knees on the pavement. I screamed at her asking if she was insane and pointed out that she had just hit a person. She said he was in her way and that he shouldn't have been standing there. The man got back up, clearly shaken but determined. He told her that was assault with a deadly weapon and that she was going to jail. Karen threw her car into drive and peeled out of there, leaving tire marks on the road. I helped the older man up and made sure he was okay while we waited for the police to arrive. When the officers showed up about 5 minutes later, we gave them the whole story. They took photos of the scene and got our statements. The witness had managed to get Karen's license plate number before she fled, so they had that information too. One officer told me not to worry and that they would track her down. He explained that hit and run was a serious charge, especially with the assault component. I asked him how long he thought it would take. He said she couldn't have gotten far and that they had already put out an alert for her vehicle. When his radio crackled to life, the dispatcher reported a major collision at the intersection of Pine and 2nd, where a silver car had hit a patrol car. The suspect vehicle matched the alert they had put out. The officer looked at me with a grin and said, "It looked like my hit-and-run driver had just made things a whole lot worse for herself." We all drove over to the scene, and what we saw was incredible. Karen's car was completely totaled. She had apparently run a red light again and slammed right into the side of a police cruiser. The patrol car was banged up, but the officer inside was okay. Karen's car had deployed both airbags and was smoking. There were already 3 police cars on scene, an ambulance, and a fire truck. Karen was sitting on the curb with her hands cuffed behind her back, crying and screaming about how unfair everything was. She kept saying it was all a big misunderstanding and that she was just trying to get home to her children. One officer told her that she had fled the scene of an accident, committed assault with a vehicle, and then caused another major collision. He said there was no misunderstanding here. Karen demanded to call her lawyer and claimed this was harassment. The officer told her she would get her phone call at the station. They loaded her into the back of a patrol car and drove her away. The paramedics checked out the police officer who was in the cruiser she hit, and thankfully he was just shaken up. A few weeks later, I had to go to court as a witness. Karen had hired some expensive lawyer who tried to argue that she was having a medical emergency and that's why she fled the scene. The prosecutor tore that argument apart pretty quickly, especially since we had the witness who saw her deliberately back into him. The judge wasn't buying any of Karen's excuses. She got convicted on multiple charges including hit and run, assault with a deadly weapon, reckless driving, and destruction of public property for destroying the police car. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison and had to pay restitution to everyone involved. Her insurance company had to pay for all the damages since she was clearly at fault. I got my car completely repaired and it actually looked better than it had in years. The older man who tried to stop her got his medical bills covered and some additional compensation for his trouble. Karen tried to appeal the decision, but it was denied. She's still in prison and her driver's license was suspended for 10 years. I guess she won't be running any more red lights anytime soon. I'm 25 and work at this day camp every summer. I've been doing it for 3 years now. The thing is, I'm really short and pretty heavy. I'm under 5 feet tall and weigh around 200 pounds. I know how that sounds, but before you start worrying about my health, let me explain. I have a medical condition that keeps me short, and I get blood tests done regularly because of it. My doctors always tell me my cholesterol and insulin levels are fine. I'm actually pretty active and healthy despite what people might think when they look at me. This summer I got paired with a new co-counselor. This guy is probably around my age and he's a baseball player. We look like complete opposites. He's got more than a foot on me in height and weighs about the same as me, so he looks really fit and athletic. He's always talking about how he hits the gym for a couple hours after work, even after we spend all day running around with the kids in the heat. The first few weeks went fine. We worked well together with the kids, and I thought we made a good team. But then something started becoming obvious, and it created a problem I never saw coming. When it comes to actual practical strength, I'm just stronger than him. I don't try to show off or anything. It just happens naturally during our daily work, like when we have to carry 20 backpacks from the bus to the activity area. He can only manage 8 while I grab 12 without breaking a sweat. Or when the kids have those stubborn juice boxes or water bottles they can't open, and he struggles with them while I pop them open easily. The worst part is when we have to move heavy equipment. We have these big plastic storage containers full of sports equipment that we need to move around throughout the day. He'll be huffing and puffing while dragging one, and I'll be walking normally carrying another one. It's not like I'm trying to make him look bad. I'm just doing my job. The kids started noticing pretty quickly. When they want to be picked up or need help with something heavy, they come to me instead of him. During hikes, when their backpacks get too heavy, they ask me to carry them. When they can't open their lunch containers, they bring them to me first. One day, a kid came up to us during lunch break. He handed his thermos to my co-counselor first, asking for help opening it. My co-counselor twisted and pulled, but couldn't get it open. He apologized and said it was really stuck. The kid immediately turned to me and asked if I could try. I opened it easily and handed it back. The kid grinned and thanked me, calling me the strong counselor. My co-counselor's face turned red, but he didn't say anything at the time. This kind of thing kept happening. The kids weren't being mean about it. They were just being practical. If they needed something opened or wanted to be lifted up, they came to me because they knew I could do it. Things came to a head last week. Another counselor pulled me aside during break time. He told me that my co-counselor had come to him with a concern. My co-counselor felt like I was embarrassing him in front of the kids. When I asked what he meant, the other counselor explained that my co-counselor had said a guy like me shouldn't be able to be stronger than him, and it was making him look bad. The kids were starting to see him as a weak one. When I asked what he meant by a guy like me, the other counselor said he was just passing along what my co-counselor had said. He thought I should tone it down a bit, because it was hard for someone who prided himself on being an athlete to be worse at something than someone who looked like me. I asked if he wanted me to do my job worse to protect his ego. The other counselor said I was being a jerk about it. He warned me that during the summer, the boys might start bullying my co-counselor if they thought he was weaker than me. I told him that was ridiculous. These kids weren't bullies, and they weren't making fun of him. They just knew who could help them when they needed it. The other counselor just told me to think about it. I was furious. They expected me to do my job poorly just to make him feel better. These kids depend on us, and I wasn't about to let them down because of his insecurity. The next day, things got worse. During our morning activity setup, we had to move some heavy equipment. My co-counselor was struggling with a container of soccer balls, so I grabbed it to help. He told me he could do it himself. I said I was just trying to help, but he insisted that he didn't need help from me. The kids were watching this whole exchange. One of them spoke up and asked why he didn't want my help, saying I was really strong. My co-counselor replied that he was strong too and that he went to the gym every day. The kid pointed out that I could carry more stuff than him. My co-counselor's face turned bright red. He told the kid that's not how strength works, explaining that real strength comes from proper training and athleticism. I tried to end the conversation by saying we should focus on getting ready for the activity, but he wasn't done. He continued explaining to the confused kids that some people just have different body types, and that just because someone looks strong doesn't mean they actually are. The kids looked confused because they could see with their own eyes what was happening, but he was trying to convince them otherwise. That afternoon, we had a parent pickup incident that finally brought everything to a head. One of the kids' moms came to get him, and her son was excited to tell her about his day. He told his mom about how his counselor was super strong and could carry 10 backpacks at once. The mom looked at me and then at my co-counselor, clearly trying to figure out which one her son was talking about. She asked which counselor he meant, and the kid pointed directly at me, saying I was the strong one. My co-counselor stepped forward and told her that actually he was the one with the athletic background. He mentioned that he played baseball and worked out regularly. The mom politely said that was nice, but then her son chimed in saying that my co-counselor couldn't open juice boxes like I could. The mom looked uncomfortable with the whole situation and said she was sure we were both very good at our jobs before leaving with her son. After she left, my co-counselor exploded. He said the situation was ridiculous and that he wasn't going to be humiliated by a bunch of kids who didn't know what they were talking about. I told him they weren't trying to humiliate him, they were just kids stating facts. He argued that the fact was that he was in better shape than me, worked out more than me, and was a real athlete. I pointed out that when we needed to actually do physical work, I was the one who got it done. He said that wasn't real strength and that he didn't know what it was. I explained it was functional strength, the kind that actually mattered for this job. He stormed off, but the next morning he came back with backup. The head counselor pulled me aside and said he needed to talk to me about the situation with my co-counselor. When I asked what about it, he explained that my co-counselor had filed a complaint saying I was creating a hostile work environment by deliberately showing off and making him look bad in front of the kids. I told him I was just doing my job, and if that made him look bad, that was his problem. The head counselor said my co-counselor claimed I was being unprofessional and that my behavior was affecting the camp's dynamic. I replied that the only thing affecting the camp's dynamic was his ego problem. The head counselor asked if I could try to be more collaborative and maybe let him handle more of the physical tasks. I asked if he meant even when my co-counselor couldn't actually do them. The head counselor just told me to try to work it out. I realized this was going nowhere. They were all more concerned with protecting his feelings than doing what was best for the kids. The breaking point came during our weekly equipment inventory. We had to move all the sports equipment from the storage shed to the main building for inspection. It was a big job with heavy containers, and we needed to get it done quickly before the kids arrived. My co-counselor started struggling with the first container, taking forever to drag it a few feet. I grabbed 2 containers and started walking toward the building. He yelled at me to stop saying I was doing it again. I asked what he meant, and he said I was showing off and trying to make him look bad. I told him I was trying to get the job done before the kids arrived. He insisted he could do it himself. I said fine and put down the containers, stepping back. He continued struggling with his 1 container, barely able to move it. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The kids would be arriving soon and we still had 8 more containers to move. He gave up and said I could help, but told me not to make it obvious that I was doing more than him. I asked how exactly I was supposed to do that. He said he didn't know but to just figure it out. He literally wanted me to pretend to be weaker than I was, so he could maintain his self-image. When the kids arrived and saw us still moving equipment, they immediately jumped in to help, but they all came to me. They said they would help me carry stuff, that I was the strongest, and asked if I could teach them how to be strong like me. My co-counselor completely lost it. He told the kids that's not how strength works, explaining that real strength comes from proper training and dedication, not from just being naturally strong. One kid pointed out that I could carry more stuff than him. My co-counselor insisted that didn't matter because he was a real athlete. When a kid asked what a real athlete was, he explained it was someone who actually trains and works out, not someone who just happens to be strong. The kids looked genuinely confused and couldn't understand why he was getting so upset about something so obvious to them. One kid asked if we could both be strong. My co-counselor said no, that there could only be one strong counselor, and it should be him. I told the kids that actually their other counselor was right about one thing. I explained that there are different types of strength, that he was really good at sports and running, and I was good at lifting and carrying things. I said we both had our strengths. One kid asked if we were both strong then. I said exactly, but it just made him angrier. He said that's not what he meant. Later that day, he went to the head counselor again. This time, they called me into the office together. The head counselor said they needed to resolve the situation because my co-counselor felt that I wasn't being a team player. I asked how I wasn't being a team player. My co-counselor accused me of deliberately trying to make him look weak in front of the kids. I told him I was literally just doing my job, and if that made him look weak, maybe he should examine why that was. He insisted that he worked out every day and was in better shape than me. I asked him what happened when we actually needed to do physical work. He said that wasn't fair and that it wasn't real fitness. The head counselor asked us to calm down and wanted to know what my co-counselor would like to see happen. He said he wanted me to stop showing off and let him handle more of the physical tasks. The head counselor said that seemed reasonable. I asked if he meant even when my co-counselor couldn't actually do them. The head counselor suggested maybe we could work together more. I explained that I tried that, but he didn't want help. He wanted me to be weak. My co-counselor protested, saying he didn't want me to be weak. He wanted me to stop being stronger than him. The head counselor looked confused and said he wasn't sure how to resolve this. I suggested we have a little demonstration. When my co-counselor asked what kind, I proposed we do some of the actual tasks we needed to do for our job. Carrying backpacks, moving equipment, opening containers, just to show what we were actually talking about. The head counselor thought that might be helpful. My co-counselor agreed but said he wanted witnesses, so we set up a little test. The head counselor called over 2 other counselors to watch. We had them bring out 20 backpacks, some equipment containers, and a few of those stubborn juice boxes the kids always need help with. First test, carrying backpacks. My co-counselor managed to carry 6 backpacks before struggling. I picked up 12 and walked around easily. Second test, moving equipment. He could barely drag one container. I carried 2 at once without breaking a sweat. Third test, opening containers. He struggled with every single juice box and water bottle. I opened them all quickly and easily. The other counselors watched in amazement. One said he had no idea I was this strong. Another said it was actually really impressive. My co-counselor was turning redder by the minute. He insisted this didn't prove anything and that it wasn't real strength. One of the other counselors asked what he meant, pointing out that I was clearly stronger than him. My co-counselor said that wasn't the point, telling them to look at him and look at me, saying he was the one who should be stronger. When asked why, he explained it was because he worked out, because he was an athlete, because he looked like he should be stronger. Another counselor asked what difference that made, and my co-counselor said it wasn't fair. I told him that life isn't fair, but the kids need help, and I can provide it. That's what matters. He said the kids should respect him more because he was the athletic one. One of the other counselors pointed out that the kids respected both of us. They just knew who to go to when they needed help with something heavy. My co-counselor complained that made him look weak. The other counselor said it only looked that way if he made it about that, and that the kids didn't care about his ego. The head counselor said he understood the problem now and that this wasn't about work performance. It was about personal insecurity. My co-counselor insisted he wasn't insecure. The head counselor explained that he was asking his co-worker to perform worse at his job so he could feel better about himself. My co-counselor said he was asking me to be a team player. The head counselor corrected him, saying he was asking me to be weak so he could feel strong. The head counselor turned to me and said he owed me an apology. He explained that I've been doing my job well, and he shouldn't have asked me to do it worse. I thanked him. He also said he needed to have a serious conversation with my co-counselor about professional behavior. In the end, my co-counselor was reassigned to work with a different group, and I got a new partner who actually appreciates having someone strong to help with the physical demands of the job. The kids are happier because they get the help they need, and I don't have to pretend to be weaker than I am. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.